Hi there. Welcome to Mushroom Hour. Today on Mushroom Hour, we're blessed by the presence of inventor and biodesigner Bob Hendrikx, coming to us all the way from the Netherlands. Through his work at Studio Hendrikx, Bob strives to restore the parasitic relationship between humanity and its environment by expanding the horizon of human imagination and exploring living materials. His Living Cocoon project has captured headlines around the world with a coffin made from mycelium that helps bodies decompose faster while improving the surrounding soil. Through all of his design endeavors, Bob embraces the notion that the current way we build and produce materials must change fundamentally. I'm excited to hear from this visionary designer how we may be able to shift humankind's 200,000-year model of parasitism and extraction by taking a cue from Mother Nature itself, who has been leading the way for 3.8 billion years by growing materials and building in ecological harmony. Bob, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much.
Well, I am loaded with enthusiasm because I've followed your work for a while. I love what you're doing and the ethos behind what you're exploring in your design, and I want to talk about it all. But I always love to start with a little backstory on you. You know, we want to hear about how Bob from the Netherlands found ecological or bio design, discovered fungi. You know, what were some of the sequence of events that brought you to the field you're in today?
I think it actually started in my youth. I'm born and raised in Eindhoven, which is a city in the south of the Netherlands. Actually, Philips was invented there. And I'm the youngest of four boys. So during my youth, I wasn't always taking, sort of seriously, as you can imagine. And sometimes that didn't really feel good. And I had to do a lot of things to get attention, of course. I think sort of during my youth, we also visit a lot of nature. And I felt that broken relationship maybe that I had with my brothers about not being taken seriously, that I felt it with nature as well. So I saw people taking nature not seriously. So I always had a lot of empathy for nature, for the good guy, the David versus the Goliath. Yeah, and then I started to studying architecture. And during my studies, I realized like, hey, the way we are currently building is really parasitic. So in general, everything we produce, we just take something out of the forest, we kill it, an organism, and then we use it.
Right.
Well, I knew nature was so alive. So during walks, hikes, etc., nature was always flourishing. It was dynamic. It was this continuous loop. And there I said, with all the architecture students, making things out of concrete, killing trees. It was sort of, we were building sort of this cemetery of materials that we called home.
Oh, yeah.
And then I realized like, hey, if we want to change our relationship, we should, sort of perhaps keep the organism alive. So I just had this crazy thought like, hey, what if we no longer work with dead materials, but actually start exploring a world in which all materials are alive. So our everyday objects, they turn into life. What would that mean? And then I just started exploring all kinds of organisms that we could perhaps sort of use and do things with. And then during my research, I learned that I was still trying to sort of make nature into my, into my function, sort of to deform nature as it is my need.
Right.
And then I realized like, hey, but what if we can look at organisms with their perspective and see how they can add value to our lives. And then I stumbled upon Mycelium, which I was already doing some material experiments with. And what I did in the previous time was putting it in the oven. I was shredding it so we can have like bio-based materials. And I do think, of course, looking at how we're working with materials right now, it is a step in the right direction, but it's not good. It's less bad. And I was really looking for a fundamental change, a way we are not parasitic anymore, but we actually add value. So I said, what if I keep this mycelium alive? What does it want to do? Like literally, I didn't know what mycelium sort of, what was the history of the organism? What was its function, its role in nature? And I just started deep diving. And it's of course really interesting because I sort of turned myself from an architecture student to a biology student, which was pretty weird. And people like, yeah, hey, designing with living materials, yeah, they will die, they will never hold, all kinds of criticisms. But I felt it was the right direction. Yeah, so I started exploring it. And the cool thing about it was that I learned very quickly that living materials have amazing material properties. Mm. So right now we know, okay, yeah, something needs to be stiff. It needs to be some kind of, how do you say it, stiff material, has some kind of a thickness. Yeah, very normal parameters. Right. Well, if you keep something alive, then it can be spongy, it can be transformative, it can be self-healing, can be breathing, like all these new elements that was really exciting to experience. And then I decided, okay, yeah, let's show the world of the living. So let's create a house that is alive. And that's what I did at the Dutch Design Week, where I created like world's first living home. And then people actually had to nurture it in order to extend their stay, which was sort of like a big Tamagotchi environment, right. Which was really fun, but was still like, a small scale. Yeah. And of course, that moment really was the starting point for the living coffin, because at some point a woman came to me. She was like, hey, I really like your projects, very interesting approach, but what happens if, for example, my grandma dies and I leave her here? And that was for me like a moment like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. It's the organism that represents like the recycling of life and allowing death to turn it into new life. And here we are sort of contaminating our environment when we die, not making use of proper ecological life cycles. So I thought, whoa, this could be a super cool opportunity, that I said like, hey, after graduation, I'm going to start this, and I don't know what will happen, but I just have to jump for it. And that's sort of what happened.
Well, it's a powerful story. And I love this shift in perspective you're talking about, where you're trying to work with things that are alive in their living state. I mean, it's part of this bigger concept of seeing ourselves as part of a complex ecology. And if we're going to thrive in that ecology and have that ecology thrive with us, we can't simply kill it and extract from it. We need to give back and become part of this bigger loop. You know, when we're talking about whether it's the coffin project or the living house, what are some of the natural concepts that are inspiring your projects? You know, because we have this view of nature, we know some of the processes at work, but when it comes to applying it and actually using it or making it an effective material for human use, you know, what are some of the concepts you're tapping into with living materials that end up inspiring your projects?
That's a very, very cool question. I think the general concept that excites me most is to create something from nothing. I can just be fascinated about like how an organism grows. Like there is nothing there. Where is it getting its building blocks from? Like what is happening? I really cannot grasp it. Like how coral grows, how bees make their nests. Yeah, it just really fascinates me. And looking more into biology, I of course better understand what are these building blocks, how are they built up? And getting inspiration just simply from nature and the way they construct. So, for example, I know that there are bio bricks that sort of mimic the way coral creates its structure. So, for example, projects like that really inspired me to not want to extract things from nature, but really grow nature. So that's now, of course, the funny thing. Like we are building homes right now, but of course, the future will be just growing homes. You get a seat at the Home Depot that says like villa or small condo, and you just plant it and then you get your house.
I love that vision of planting houses. And I think for anyone here in America, you know, as housing prices skyrocket to build dead houses, this concept of going to Home Depot to buy a house we can grow sounds really good. I love that. I guess then designers who follow your path of being more inspired by natural perspectives and natural processes, is this something that you see on the rise in the design world? And then how can this change on kind of a much bigger scale start with designers who are following the path you're following?
think what I'm seeing right now, that we are as a society are coming sort of from this industrial area where pollution is accepted, and we're moving towards like the regenerative economy in which we actually add value.
Right.
But of course, within our capitalist system right now, it depends on, of course, which government it is. Some are a little bit more progressive about it, but it's still very hard to add value to nature because you're not financially rewarded for it often. So that's why it doesn't happen that often. But I think we're definitely moving to a little bit more sustainable and bio-based world in which we want to minimize pollution and sometimes even add value. Of course, I hope in the future that we are adding value is sort of the main parameter. And what I see now with designers around me, definitely the bio-based trend is big. Yeah, to be honest, I think that's a good trend because it makes the world a bit better. But I sort of would like to challenge fellow designers like, hey, what if you do not kill the organism? How can you design your product that it actually accepts the organism? And also to challenge designers like, hey, just look into nature. Just pick one crazy organism. I mean, take an ice bear. Oh, sorry, polar bear, you guys call it, right?
Yeah. I like ice bear, though.
In Dutch, it's ijsbeer. So that's why the Dinglish, Dutch English, we call it.
Yeah.
But take, for example, a polar bear. It's freaking cold. How does it keep its body warm? There is so much technology in nature that we cannot grasp. Of course, with mushrooms, like how amazing are mushrooms, what they're doing inside the ground, what is happening. We actually just ordered a light emitting mushroom to research like, hey, how is it produced? What is happening? Can we create street lights out of it?
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I want to challenge fellow designers, innovators, but also entrepreneurs like, hey, there's just a big opportunity. Like everywhere, free technology is there. The only thing is, you need to change your mindset and really take very crazy ideas very serious.
I mean, how huge a difference it can make to just have that shift in perspective where you're really learning and listening from nature. You know, you're examining things for what they already are able to do. You're seeing that as a technology and really trying to be sympathetic to that process or that material or that concept and really listen and learn. And I think for a lot of people, mushrooms or mycology can be a journey into that mind space to where you're trying to understand this fascinating organism that is the mushroom, the mycelium underground. What is it doing? How is it making decisions that it's making? You know, how is it exhibiting these amazing biological capacities? And that process of really trying to learn from the organism is such a big shift to first thinking, okay, how can I use it? Or what do I need?
Exactly.
And what can I extract? So that's a huge shift in perspective. And how does this kind of shift in perspective to see things as part of a greater ecology and grow rather than build with dead materials, you know, how can that bring us into better relationship with our fellow humans?
Great question. I think it asks us as a human to really listen. And when we listen to nature, maybe it's easy to listen to nature for a human because it says something, but you can perhaps maybe be a little bit more objective. And I think really what sort of the world now needs, especially, of course, with the situation, what happened in America, but also, across Europe, there's a lot of polarization. I think we need to again learn how to listen. I also, of course, do it. You have a conversation, but you're not really having a conversation. It's just like me. And I think that is part of sort of the bigger trend that is going on, which is the contradictionary, of course, of the more Asian philosophy is very individualistic that we are as a society. And I think especially the younger generation who are, for example, finding it in mushrooms, but also in meditation, etc. So that's sort of a search towards and the ability to listen.
And I think so many people feel that on an instinctive level, that that's the direction we need to move in as our society evolves. And does that kind of blend into this concept that I saw referenced in some of your work of Homo Natura? Is that kind of the next? Is that the next step that we're moving toward? Hopefully,
that's sort of the dream. So what I envision, what I would love to explore, and currently am exploring is this living world. So we live in homes that breathe. I wear a t-shirt that is self-healing. When I die, I get decomposed by a living coffin. This is the world I want to live in. And in that world lives a human who is not sitting next to the cycle of life, but who is actually a part of life. So how cool if we can have, for example, vegetables grown from your hand, or other crazy stuff that we're really part of nature. And that is really the Homo Natura. And I think biotechnology can help a lot in there. And of course, we already know that we are capable of doing like super crazy things. But then, of course, also the ethical question comes in like, hey, what do we really want or what do we not want?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask that, how much the precautionary principle plays into your work, you know, how much you want to be careful with what changes you make to an environment or what new living organisms you introduce to an environment, and how that might affect the ecology there. So does that play into the decisions you have to make when you're thinking about a living world? Is, you know, the native ecology where you might install a building or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's very important, to have respect for history, respect for the current environment. That's, of course, what a good architect is always about, they say. I envision it is that the natural world of each continent is different. So its architecture and products might also be. That, of course, gives a whole nother level to culture, that you have different products per area. Yeah, maybe back in the days we had it as well, that you have different architectures, and maybe this could be a new archetype. That could be really interesting. Yeah, and furthermore, like what products you design. So, for example, with the living coffin, we're making use of a species that is not dominant to Northern Europe. It's not a dominant species at all. But yeah, of course, if we would use a very aggressive mushroom, then the graveyards will have a different meaning in a while.
Right. That was going to be a question I had about the coffin. If you could reveal it, I wasn't sure how much was proprietary, but what species that you were using, is that something you could share?
Yeah, we're using a relative of a Ganoderma.
Ah, okay. Okay, that makes sense.
He's a good acquaintance of us.
So one of those kind of hard conch Ganoderma relative mushrooms. And then when we're talking about the coffin, because people may have seen this on Vice or, you know, on the internet, it's been going around everywhere, this idea of the mushroom or mycelium coffin. What is the process of manufacturing the coffin? You know, is it forms? Is it wood that you inoculate? You know, how are you guys creating the actual coffin?
We actually grow the living coffin in only 7 days. So what we do, we go into the woods, find the right mushroom, and inoculate organic matter with this mushroom. So it's sort of, the mycelium acts as a binder among all this organic matter and hereby creates solid shapes. And we can place it inside molds that have the right shape, potentially for every product you can imagine. Of course, we have a coffin, so we have a special shape, of course. And then we grow it inside the coffin for a few days, and then also outside the coffin. So it creates a skin, almost like a French cheese, a brie, one might say. The product really becomes cuddly. And thereby we also want to emphasize like, hey, molds or mycelium or mushrooms, they aren't scary, they aren't dirty, or we want to also change that perspective. I don't know what is the sort of the language that you guys have for mushrooms in America that people frown upon or people enjoy it. But in the Netherlands, it doesn't have a good reputation. So we're changing that.
Yeah, that's something that's been shifting in America, is this idea of mycophobia, where people have a fear or don't like mushrooms. And we're trying to transition it, you know, toward a more mycophilic culture where we like mushrooms. Ooh. And I think that's happening in a big way. Of course, I was curious if that's the case in the Netherlands, but it sounds like you're up against kind of a tide of mycophobia, or a cultural standard of mycophobia.
Yeah. Average Joe is definitely like, hey, a mold, ooh, what is it? Scary. It can be toxic. Get out. But definitely there are a lot of initiatives around mushrooms. So mushrooms are definitely getting more popular. Different people are experimenting with it. And in the design field, it's definitely well explored. So we're getting there.
The shift is happening probably in no small part thanks to the work of Bob Hendrikx. And when we're talking about the coffins, what is the end vision for this? Is this going to be something that you'll be working with existing coffin manufacturers? How do you plan for it to be received by the funerary industry, which is something, including myself, most people know very little about? So how do you end up kind of getting this in the hands of folks in that industry to then use it for its purpose?
Yeah, so it's a very sort of weird market. Especially in the beginning, I was, to be honest, kind of scary because I had this product ID. My friends had sort of a normal job, and I was like doing this in the shed of my parents. Yeah, what are you doing, Bob? Yeah, creating a living coffin for the funeral industry. And people were like, wow, this guy is crazy.
Right.
But I just started exploring and contacting like funeral companies, funeral homes, and everybody was super enthusiastic. And at some point, we got like a distributor, and now we're sort of like in the grocery store of funeral coffins, and people can actually buy us. And this will be happening like in the coming months that we will go live. We had like a complete viral media campaign, which we were completely not ready for.
Right.
And yes, now we are ready. So we're super excited to turn people into trees, because in the end, that's our goal. We wish to no longer pollute Earth, but actually enrich it. And I mean, when I want to speak to you, I don't consider you as waste, but I consider you as compost. And I think that should be our approach to life, that we can add value even after death. The first vision, the first challenge we have to overcome is to get the product really in the shops and people start buying it. Well, that's going pretty well. And then the second challenge is, or second mission and vision, is to really change the landscape of funerals and really light up the darkness and create forests where people can become one with nature again and not create landfills, so to say. What is happening currently, I'm not sure, of course, about the American market, but what we're putting into the soil is not very helpful. And I always make this sort of statement that when I walk into the street of a city, I throw a can of Coca-Cola on the ground, I get a fine. Yet like every day we just bury ourselves with so many trash, with so many people. It's just really not the right way to go, in my opinion.
Introducing something like this coffin idea, I mean, this has massive implications for culturally our relationship with death, and I think in Western European culture, particularly American culture, there is no topic more taboo or no topic that people want to get further from than the idea of no longer being here. But if we thought of it less as kind of a graveyard when you die, but more as a living, vibrant forest, what a huge shift in our mind space.
Crazy, yeah.
So, I mean, how is this process affected your own relationship and perspectives on the specter of death?
Yeah, great question. Yes, to be honest, it's really emotional. So I started this project also being afraid of death. I wouldn't say I'm not afraid of that anymore, but at least I feel like I more understand it. And it was actually a really special moment. At some point, we did a test with our coffin. We said like, hey, our coffin is ready. It's our first prototype. We want to test and see if somebody would like to buy it. It was a while ago. So we created like this flyer. And we gave it to a funeral home and said like, hey, maybe you can try it one day and see what happens. And like literally on the first day, somebody bought it.
Wow.
And for us, that was like, that moment that some idea turned into reality, it was like crazy. And at that moment, we also had to test everything. So we have to check out everything, because I'm an architect, I'm a designer. And of course, we did a really good job, but we have to engineer everything, that everything is going in the right direction. So we have to check on it.
Right.
But it also meant like checking the body, laying in the coffin that you designed, because that happened often. After seeing like so many dead bodies, it sort of becomes really normal, to be honest. And one of the funeral caretakers told me like, hey, Bob, normal people only see like 5 or 6 dead bodies in their whole life. And when you see them more, it just gets normal. And I thought that was so powerful. Like death is so far away from us. we don't often see it. And I think that's also why we are scared of it. And now I experience like death to be so close. And it was actually pretty peaceful, sort of knowing that you're going to be one with nature and that your nutrients grow into something new. Thereby, I wish to also sort of change that perspective of this linear mindset, but really about having this circular thoughts like, hey, it's a cycle.
Well, and I think you're tapping into this deep subconscious urge that so many of us have, which is to wrestle with that concept and not be scared of it. I mean, we don't want to walk around our whole lives fearing death just because we don't understand it. And I'm reminded of reading about, other cultures and even more ancient cultures that would actually keep the dead in their homes after they
Exactly.
passed.
Yeah.
And then the family develops this relationship and sees, that it's not something to be feared. That's really powerful. You got to go through that journey of seeing how proximity to the dead actually decreases your fear of that process.
Yeah, this is a really good insight. And it also attracted people. So, for example, with normally building a startup team, it's like looking at skills and this and that. And we actually got so many people who had such an emotional connection. Like the diversity was crazy, but everyone had like a very personal story. Like, hey, this happened to me. So I also feel like that is really unifying. I think that's also a really nice topic because everyone is going to die.
Right.
And it's really nice to work with people who sort of have all the same end result and look at the similarities instead of like all the differences.
Oh, that's a beautiful insight. And talking about our polarized world, nothing better to unify us on than maybe overcoming some universal milestone, if you will, that marks kind of the end. Nothing more unifying than all kind of collaborating over that. A lot of fascinating insights and potentially culture shifting, awareness that you're activating in people when you just present that option of, hey, do you want to become compost, which I think a lot of people will agree with me that maybe the highest honor we can have when we pass from this world is that we could be compost to kind of keep the cycle of regeneration going. That whole project is just one project under the Studio Hendrikx umbrella, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Another project I saw on your website, though, that I'm really interested in that I hadn't seen, your TED Talks on or anything yet was the Interlink project. Tell us a little bit about Interlink and kind of what stage that is and what the concepts behind that project are.
Yeah. So Interlink is really about, of course, this bigger theme of becoming part of the cycle, like literally interlinking into the system as if your Wi-Fi cable plugs out, then you need to plug it back in. Mm-hmm. It was definitely in the time that was really fascinated about nature's internet and how everything is connected. Yeah, what I envisioned is a living home made from mycelium in which people have to nurture their home in order to extend their stay. So I created like a 1-on-2 scale model. And this summer, actually autumn, we're going to grow a 1-on-1 size scale in Amsterdam, but potentially hold your horses in the desert of the USA.
What?
That potential really cool TV show that even potentially can come up on a really large broadcast. So we're in the developing stage with that. If that goes through, that's crazy. And then we're going to not only create like one home, but then the goal is to actually create a small village.
Oh my, you are about to change everyone's conception of what building could be and put mycelium in the spotlight. Now, when you talk about building an entire home, obviously there's a layer of complexity that we can't hope to totally cover on the podcast. But are you using more than one species? And is the entirety of this built of mycelium, or do you have things like plumbing and wires out of other materials? Or
yeah, exactly. So that is, of course, sort of finding this balance between what is the ideal situation and what is realistic now.
Right.
And of course, if we are in the more artistic scene, we can create a more pure nature-based environment. But if we actually want to sort of make it realistic and available to a lot of people in the world, then we just have laws, we have permits, we have all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, of course.
So that is sort of challenging. Like, hey, how do you create that? So right now, what we're exploring is creating like outer construction out of wooden beams in which mycelium pods can be grown into place, and then they actually attach themselves by growing into like the construction. And then the pods are almost fully mycelium based with some reinforcements because maybe the flooring will not be so safe without.
Right.
Yeah, and definitely also using different types of mushrooms. As I said, we're exploring light-emitting mushrooms right now. And what would that mean if you have a light-emitting home at night? Or there can be some form of communication that when your house is hungry, it communicates with light, hey, I'm hungry, give me food. And you have to nurture it.
Okay, no way. We're going to have houses that communicate with us through bioluminescence. And I think a lot of folks who are into mushrooms, when you see that first Panella stypticus, or you see, whatever your first bioluminescent mushroom is, that's usually the immediate thought is, okay, how can I use this to create mushroom lights in my home? And there are mushrooms whose fruit bodies light up, but there are plenty of mushrooms whose mycelium lights up. So you can actually use the mycelium, concentrated block of mycelium, as the light itself.
Exactly.
Oh, that's a fascinating concept.
That would be crazy, right? Yeah.
I am fully supporting cities made for mycelium in the not too distant future. And I love that you just offer that perspective, though, of, having to work with civic planning and regulation as it is today.
Yes.
And navigating those realities. So you're really on kind of the leading edge of making this work possible for others. And I guess as someone who is so cognizant of the natural world, who's really trying to faithfully make humans a part of this greater ecology in a more, holistic sense, how much do you have to balance that with being a person running a business and a business person? I mean,
oh my gosh.
Are you totally open source and everyone, or do you have to protect those ideas? I mean, what is that balance for you?
Yeah, this is a great question. My mom is artist. My dad is an entrepreneur. I'm like split into half.
You're the blend. Yeah, you're the perfect blend.
Exactly. So, yeah, in some ways, it of course is super nice. I get to do like crazy adventures, but also on a personal level, sometimes it's really contradictory because I have my ideals. I have this vision for the future world, but then again, there's also reality that not everything is possible right now. Mm-hmm. I do believe a lot of things will be possible as I strive for them. But some things you don't have in control yourself, like the law, for example. Right. But also like with running a startup. So for example, we really went viral with Loop, the Living Cocoon, the Living Coffin. So I had to hire like a lot of people, get investment, all kinds of things, which are relatively new to me, which I also enjoy because I enjoy learning. But in the end, I don't want to be the businessman. I want to be the thinker, the designer, the visionary that always keeps pushing forward. So that's also some realities that I had to take in consideration for anyone out there, thinking about your role inside what you are creating. Do you want to do everything? Do you want to be more, an owner of ideas? That's been in my head for the past, I would say, half year. Like, what is my role in my ecosystem that I developed?
Right.
And luckily, I found some good operational people who are really structured that can help me out with this challenge.
Yeah, I'd imagine you'd end up with a pretty diverse team. You hinted at it with the Coffin project, but I'd imagine, you'd cross-pollinate with biologists and all kinds of people who may not be designers, but offer their unique perspective.
Exactly. And that's also really beautiful, again, with the metaphor with nature, in which everybody plays their unique role, and altogether you are in this beautiful harmony in which everybody has his own needs, but also takes in consideration the needs of others.
And, it's going to be a process of growth, as people like yourself kind of figure out, because I think a lot of people have this feeling that the system that we're in isn't really serving our human needs. It's not serving nature. So we just want to get away from the system and not engage with it at all. But I think it's going to be more of this process of growth with people like yourself who bring radical ideas that would totally shift us away from the system we're in now. But sometimes those seeds have to be nurtured in the environment they're already in. These ideas can't necessarily just do away with the system immediately. They incubate within that structure, and you're finding creative ways to navigate and not totally lose your ideals along the way. And then as more and more people get behind ideas like this, we're going to see those bigger shifts institutionally and in terms of regulation and how, all these different pillars of our modern society shift. I mean, do you see that as kind of the pathway rather than just, we need to shatter the system and make something new? Do we need to kind of grow up through the cracks of what's already in place?
Yeah, this was a really nice what you said. I'm not sure if you call it the same, but I got chicken skin. You call it chicken skin?
Goosebumps.
Or not?
Goosebumps. Yeah,
Goosebumps.
chicken skin.
Okay.
I love that.
Oh my God. That's how we call it in
Dinglish.
Exactly, Dinglish. Great language. But oh my God, yeah, I fully believe that. It's like we have a saying in Dutch, which is een wolf in schaapskleren, which means like a wolf dressed as a sheep,
yes,
following the herd. But in the end, he's a wolf. And of course, that's maybe with a little bit negative connotation that it's sort of going to kill the sheep. But I do believe it's sort of like, it's again about balance, because we cannot deny reality. There is a certain reality right now which we wish to change. And I think the best way to make that change is to get people enthusiastic and show the upsides of your added value. And I think that is what I've been trying to do. And I really believe in what you said. If we get more initiatives out there like this, people start, like with the Living Coffin, we just literally launched a living product. People can buy an organism and be buried in it. It's super practical, yet it's a radical shift sort of in perspective. And once people get familiar with living products, then laws will change because, why would, for example, a cemetery bury something that's bad for the environment instead of something that's good?
Right.
Yeah, so I really think it's really about getting people behind you and people behind the ideas.
Yeah, I think we can't underestimate the power of innovators like yourself. And I think a lot of people have this potential. I think everyone has this potential to innovate with ideas that will change the system. I think a lot of us get overwhelmed by seeing kind of what we're born into and thinking, well, this isn't right. Well, then we can do something to change it. So we don't want to disempower ourselves. And I very much see now, maybe, I'm biased because I talk to people like you who are inspiring and I'm like, yes, the world's shifting, but I really think it is. And I really think we're seeing that more and more. Now, what are some of the other future projects? I mean, you've already stretched yourself pretty thin. You're at the heart of a brand new entrepreneurial venture that's kind of taking over the world. You want to build living houses, but are there any future projects you have in mind that you're moving toward that the team there at Studio Hendrikx kind of has in the ideascape, if you will?
Definitely the living T-shirt. That's something I want. That's more in the explorative phase.
How is that possible? What are we making a living T-shirt out of?
I don't know yet. I've been looking at shrimp for a while and how they sort of create their structures because they have sort of flexible structures that grow with their bodies, and all kinds of interesting research like, hey, what organisms are out there that are sort of doing something I want, which might be in the right direction. We don't know yet. So that's something we're looking at, definitely at Ocean Live for the living T-shirt. Yeah. And on the other hand, that is a little bit more practical, is the living street light. It's a little bit more biotechnology based, right, but changing or actually adding enzymes that can emit light or certain bacteria into living plants so they glow at night. So that's like Avatar came to life, right. Reality. And we've been experimenting with it. What we're noticing is it is possible, yet the light is super not bright. Right. So getting the sharp colors we get from normal street light, hey, is that possible? How can we get there? Should we get there? But once one of these projects get specific, you will definitely hear it.
I have a feeling it will be, if the coffin's any indication, I have a feeling it will be pervading our collective consciousness. That's fantastic to think about. Yeah, and I know that, again, this precautionary principle comes into play with, when you're talking about luciferase or whatever enzyme we're talking about that might add bioluminescence. Is it okay to add it to every organism? Will it affect the organism? There's a lot of questions there. How important is it for you then? How important is it for you to get time with nature and develop your relationship with nature in terms of thinking of these radical new ideas?
All my inspiration comes from nature. When I'm nature, I feel calm. The Dutch environment here is pretty calm and pretty balanced. We don't have a lot of exotic nature, which I think sometimes is a little bit boring, but it also allows me to sort of really look deep into nature, since I'm not seeing so much diversity, that I look on small details. And I think that really, I mean, I can follow if I see, for example, a cow or some other deer. I can just follow it and just look at it and just have a great time. Maybe it sounds a little bit trippy, but I really do feel a lot of connection with nature. Sometimes I can have very good conversations with friends, but then I see a dog and I look into its eyes, and that's a really deep connection that I'm feeling then.
Yeah, I mean, do you see that some of the ideas that you have in biodesign, some of these inspirations, do you think some of that is you kind of becoming, Bob becomes this conduit of nature, if you will? You know, you get that intimate connection and suddenly you don't know where an inspiration comes from. And maybe, you know, that's Mother Nature popping it through there.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. I feel that. And especially with sort of, it's really crazy because we grow the products, which is a living coffin, but I really see an organism. I feel sort of an organism, and it is an organism. So it's super weird that normally it was like this dead piece of wood, and now you're actually sort of adding something alive into the ground. And that just feels really nice. So when I look at all the coffins, like other people might say, like, see death, and the only thing I can see is life and nature thriving and collecting and recycling, and this whole new vibrant forest is flourishing from the ashes. It just really excites me.
I think that really excites everyone, and I'm excited for this cultural shift when we see death as more of a part of life. And I guess, do you have any advice for people who are hearing this, maybe they're into design, and how they can integrate bio principles or do more nature-based design like you do? Is there any general words of wisdom or advice you have for people?
I think the thing that helped me most was to really start from the perspective of the organism. Whatever you're designing, sort of forget it. Just check out one organism which you feel energy towards. Check it out, read about it, watch Planet Earth 20 times. And then from their technology, from their wisdom, start to explore ways how this organism could add value sort of to human life as we know it. And I think that approach shift, that is the best advice I can give. And maybe it sounds very abstract. Yeah, but I do think it's something that people should explore if they're interested to this field, because along the way, you're going to get crazy insights, crazy thoughts. Yeah, buying seeds at Home Depot to grow your home. I couldn't have thought about that. I mean, that's nature.
Well, and it seems abstract, but so many mycologists that I talk to, people that work with mushrooms, one of their biggest pieces of advice is think like a mushroom. So I don't think we can overstate then how much that perspective shift you're talking about can lead to all manner of new inspiration and new ideas that flow from there. If we just get out of our human suit for a second and look from the perspective of another organism, how truly powerful that can be. Well, Bob, I'm sure everybody listening like I am is super excited about your work, wants to know more, wants to support you. Where is the best place for people to connect? Maybe it's with the Loop project, the Living Cocoon, or Studio Hendrikx, or you personally. You know, where's the best place for people to go to engage with your work?
Yeah, I think it's definitely to go, if it's like coffin related, people can go to Loop Biotech. Yeah, if you just type in Google Living Coffin, you'll see my head. And for more personal questions and like new research that we are conducting with the light emitting tree, light emitting street light, the sort of the village of living homes, people can get to www.bobhendrikx.com. And then, we can talk, because I believe there's a lot of knowledge out there, and people who are listening to this, everyone can add value. I'm convinced of that. Like my time in Detroit, I've seen value in every person, but only if you listen. The question is, how much time do you have to listen? Because reality kicks in, you only have so much time and only 2 ears.
Right.
But I would love to hear from people, their thoughts, and how we potentially could collaborate.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know there are a lot of citizen science groups and amateur mycologists and academic mycologists that play with these ideas and work with their own projects. So I encourage everyone to try to connect in this kind of decentralized network as much as we can, because I'm always fascinated to see the knowledge share that happens and how we build on each other's ideas. And I think that's a big part of getting to the future that you've kind of painted the vision for, is getting a lot more brains behind it and helping.
Yes.
I'm going to wrap things up then with a couple questions that I like to ask all my guests. And sometimes this first one is one of the hardest, but what is a mushroom or a fungus that you love and why? And this can be something edible, something you love to look at, or maybe something you work with, but a mushroom or fungus that you love and why?
Holy. Okay. What is my favorite mushroom? Oh, yeah, I know. My favorite mushroom is, I had to think a little bit about it.
Of course.
Then it all of a sudden became very clear. It's the coral mushroom. In the Netherlands, we have a very small one, and it's called kleine kleverige koraalzwammetje. And as you guys heard, it's super cute. It's like this really tiny 3 centimeter long coral mushroom, like crazy bright orange. It's in the Netherlands. I'm not sure which type you guys have of coral mushrooms in the USA. But this one is really, setting the tone in the Dutch environment, like a lot of gray tones, brown tones, and then you have this crazy orange one that's also looking like it came out of a science fiction movie. Yeah, that's definitely one of the ones that inspires me as a human.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, we feel that connection instinctively between mushrooms and coral, and no more embodied than the Ramaria, the coral mushroom. Where I live in Northern California, we have a few different varieties. I'm not even going to try to pronounce any Dutch names. But yes, that is a mushroom that holds, I think, a special fascination for a lot of people. A great choice. And then a much bigger question. You can go any direction you want with this. We've hinted at it throughout the conversation, but what has this relationship you've developed with fungi? What has that brought to your life in terms of new perspectives, maybe spiritual connection, but what has this relationship that you've developed really brought to your life? How has it changed your life?
It made me feel part of the environment again. It made me also feel safe. That maybe sounds sort of weird, but I really... the insight into mushrooms and how life evolves in the cycles, it was really calming to me and gave me a lot of rest and a lot of balance.
I love that word. It makes you feel safe, because I think that's something that we aren't always conscious of, but how developing a relationship with something like fungi that seems to connect all of the natural world and is playing a role somewhere in symbiosis with so many things really can give you this sense of greater belonging and safety.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that idea. Well, Bob, thank you so much I know you're really busy. Like you said, you're on this viral media tour. So I really appreciate you setting aside the time to come and talk with us about your amazing work. Of course. And I encourage everyone to go check it out. Go follow Bob's work. And I'm excited to see what you create next. And hopefully we'll have you back on to talk about it. So thank you for coming on the Mushroom Hour.
Nice. Thank you very much. That will be very great. Excited for the future.